You literally hold a PhD in organization and management. You have studied the absolute highest levels of corporate theory, but business is messy and human. Was there a moment in your career where all the theory went out the window, you were staring down a massive crisis, and you felt total imposter syndrome?
There was a moment of catastrophe. There have been actually several moments of catastrophe in business. And I wouldn't say that I felt imposter syndrome. The one that comes immediately to mind is I was in Silicon Valley. I had just left American and I flew to San Francisco, and on the advice of folks, I was going to build a social network that would be for youth and young professionals. Our idea was a younger version of LinkedIn that was just catered to people who didn't have experience but needed to get experience. And we raised money, and I joined this accelerator. And we went through this accelerator. It was a 6-month accelerator, and we were told at the end of the 6-month accelerator that we would be in a room and we would pitch to investors, a room full of investors. And so we did the work, we got the deck ready, we burned through the money, we created the app itself. That was also Catastrophe, because the app developer that we relocated from Portland to San Francisco ended up leaving after 2 months, days before the app itself was due to launch. Wow. I had a big magazine spread I had negotiated that was going to be on 600 American Airlines planes about the company. So developer gone, app has still to be finished, and we had to bring somebody in and do basically 6 months of work in 6 days. And then pitch in front of an investor. And we pitched the deck, and the room, first of all, didn't have the investors we were told. There was one real estate investor and then a couple of other people doing things, and nothing significant. So that was disappointing. Nonetheless, saying at the end of that journey, zero money, zero investment, zero capital. I had a team of 3, and then we had to okay, how do we keep going? And I somehow managed to negotiate a product development contract for the entire team. So we started getting money every month, covered expenses, and we were able to go for another 9 months. So 10 months into that pivot, contract gets canceled. Contract gets canceled. App doesn't have any more money. I basically have 3 months left on my lease in San Francisco, which was not cheap. I had 2 employees. How do we make this work? I literally had to figure out, okay, Airbnb the apartment so that we can cover costs that way, make a pivot and do some freelance consulting, just every little scrap of thing that we could possibly do, we got done. Wow. To survive that last 3 months. And then I made a pivot and just, gave it all away and became a digital nomad for 3 years. But it took real creativity to get through that.
And it just goes to show that someone can have a PhD, which you have. And in business and in life, there are things that just happen that are out of your control. You could have a PhD and be educated and have all this theory and practice, but the thing is, we rely on other people. We rely on other people, like that developer, the investors that were supposed to be there in your story, right? We rely on other people, and you could bring a horse to the water, you can't make a drink. So best thing you could do is just make pivots.
Yep.
This show is called Point of Departure because we investigate the pivots with leaders, innovators, and creators. And I love that word. You got to think on your feet real quick. You don't just eat what you kill as an entrepreneur. You got to really be creative. And you were creative here, and you took off your professor hat and you put on your super entrepreneur problem solver hat.
My next book, I have one more book in me, I think, and it's going to be called The Art of the Pivot. And it is largely because I've had to make about 4 massive pivots in my life through my journey. I think of entrepreneurship, and mind you, I don't mind entrepreneurship. I don't mind going to work for a company and spending three years in a company. I just came off of a 3-year stint in a company as a VP of coaching and consulting and membership. And sometimes that's a break. Sometimes it's good to take a break from entrepreneurship. But my entrepreneurial journey has been undulating topography. It's been some really low lows and some really high highs. And when you're getting to that low, you have to figure out, what is the pivot that I'm going to make, and how am I going to either take care of my team, take care of my investors, or take care of myself and get to the next milestone. Because you're going to go up again and you're going to come down again. And you have to basically plan for those reserves, plan for those downs. There are entrepreneurs who get it right, who just go up. And I often ask myself sometimes, should I have taken a very linear path? Should I have just stayed in finance, gotten the finance degree, built a finance specific company and just stayed finance all the way. And then I think back to some of the experiences that I've had traveling the world, staying in 5-star hotels, like enjoying life at another level. I wouldn't have been able to do that, or I would have had to wait to do that. And I don't have to. I did it already. I did it at 23. I did it at 25. I did it at 29. I did it at 35. And I wouldn't change it. I would do some things differently, but I wouldn't change the trajectory of, for me making my own way. I took a different path. I didn't follow the path everyone else did. And I enjoyed most of it. And what I didn't enjoy, I learned from.
This is like music to my ears because I can relate. I have a very similar path when it comes to entrepreneurship. It wasn't linear. There were a lot of ups and downs, which, is just a huge part of entrepreneurship. You a lot of times can't get around it. And I always wonder, I wondered to myself sometimes, a lot of times actually, why wasn't I this sort of linear entrepreneur and this like enormous success? But I totally agree with you. I had so many incredible experiences too. Yes, it was not easy, but you have those, golden nuggets of those special moments where you're just like, this would not have happened. I would not be in this city. I would not be meeting these people. I would not have learned all the things that I learned if I wasn't an entrepreneur. And, sometimes I say, right, is entrepreneurship really freedom or is it slavery, right? Because, we hear a lot of times, being an entrepreneur, it's when you're willing to work 80 to 100 hours a week to avoid working 40 hours for somebody else. You want to build somebody else's dream. But, to someone like myself and to you, to us, it's worth it because we keep pushing the envelope and we want more. We're not greedy, but we know that life is short and, you have to try to squeeze as much as you can out of this life. And there is a lot of flexibility and freedom in entrepreneurship. Just something as simple with your schedule. You could do something at 2 p.m. in the afternoon or, go to an appointment, to a doctor's appointment at 10 a.m. I heard that the statistic out there, I don't know if it's correct or not, it's 2/3 of people simply cannot be entrepreneurs.
I firmly believe that. I think not everybody is designed to be an entrepreneur. I did a blog post about this a few years ago, and there's a video that shows up in a lot of corporate training, and it's with a guy dancing on the hill, and then I don't know if you've seen it, and then a guy walks up next to him and starts dancing, and then more people start joining, and the title of that post was, the most important person to an entrepreneur is the first follower. The person who tells everyone else it's okay to follow that entrepreneur. And sometimes you're not a good entrepreneur. You're not great at entrepreneurship because you don't have the vision, but you're the best number two that person can have. And that's all you want to be. That number two that's able to implement that vision and make sure it gets executed, but doesn't want to be responsible for the vision.
Right.
And we see it, right? The hustler and the hacker, the creative and the business. Like most of the large companies we know, Apple, Microsoft, Facebook, there's always two people.
Yeah.
It's one person who sort of has the vision and the creativity or sells the product, and the other one who delivers it, who makes it, who codes it, and whatever. So yeah, entrepreneurship sometimes is done best in twos. All that to say, entrepreneurship as a whole, I think it's a sport. It is something that you have to be built for. As we've said, like there's the highs and the lows. You have to know how to recover from it. You have to know when to put it down and when to pick it back up again. You have to know how to represent it and share it with the world. And then you have to know how to dial it back as well. You have to know how to manage risk and chaos. And then you have to learn how to celebrate others and put them in front of you.
If you enjoyed this Key Moments segment and got value from this conversation and want to watch more Key Moments segments just like it, go ahead and click right here. And if you want to watch the entire episode, go ahead and click right here. And do me a huge favor, check to see if you're subscribed to the channel Point of Departure. I appreciate you.